Hello. Last weekend in Mexico City, Formula E held the first race of Season 9 and its exciting new Gen 3 era. However, one team sadly absent from the starting grid was, of course, the Techeetah team, who won the team's championship in Seasons 5 and 6 and took John O'Verne and Antonio Felix da Costa to 3 Drivers' Championships and 15 race victories in total. They were in the series since the very beginning of Formula E in their previous guise as Team Aguri, and someone who's been a mainstay in all 100 races with the squad is former team principal Mark Preston, who joins us now, along with Formula E's own Jack Pickering. So, Mark, Pico, how you doing?
Great, all good. And looking forward to discussing Formula E history and future.
Yeah, good to be. Good to be here. Looking forward to find out the ins and outs of the old Techeetah team.
Yeah, exactly. And Pico, if you have any questions, feel free to butt in and chime in at any point.
I'll try not to interrupt properly, but
maybe not mid question.
We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, good start. Right, so first off, Mark, we have to talk about the somewhat elephant in the room, which is, of course, the reason that Techeetah isn't on the Season 9 grid, which is, unfortunately, as you said in the stream that we did with Joshua Birch the other day, it was basically to do with money, essentially. The deal couldn't be put together for Season 9. What can you tell us about how close the team got to being on the grid? And if you can't tell us anything, then what do you plan to focus on during your sabbatical year from Formula E, essentially?
Yeah, I mean, motorsports often, about raising finances, as you know, and can appreciate from many discussions, obviously, with drivers and other people. We got quite close to finalizing things for Season 9, but just couldn't quite pull things together at the last minute. But yeah, pushing very hard. The plan for the future, unclear right at this minute. I'm now working with Lola Cars on what might be the future for Lola and how that might go into the future. Whether I'll be in Formula E, I'm not quite sure, but certainly be around racing and obviously enjoy being around alternative energies, alternative fuels, all the new things that are coming in motor racing. So you never know where we might end up in the future.
That's great to hear, Mark. And we've just been joined by Keith Smout, the former commercial director from Techeetah. So, Keith, are you there?
I am here. Good morning. Well,
Excellent.
Good morning from Canada, anyway.
Of course, yeah, I know it's a very different time zone for you guys. Is it okay, Keith, if I immediately ask you a question? Now you've just popped in.
Sure.
Okay, so I just asked Mark about how close Techeetah got to being on the grid in Season 9. We know in the end it came down to money, and I understand you have a lot of experience with that area. So could you tell us, I'll put the same question to you then. How close did you get to getting on the grid for Season 9? And what do you plan focusing on during your sabbatical year from Formula E?
Well, I'd say, unfortunately, we were really close. We probably should have been on the grid. It wasn't for a matter of the sort of commercial side from a sponsorship perspective. It was purely on the investment side and the team being purchased. And, this was actually a 2-year path, I would say. Mark and I were on to get that to happen. And at the end of Season 7, we thought that was all done and dusted. And when that actually ended up basically falling apart, which happens on investment sometimes, we spent the last year in Season 8 more in a position of, I don't want to use the word desperation, but any major investment takes a long time to happen. So we unfortunately just couldn't reach it. We were very close, but we ran out of time in order to get to the grid properly. We just didn't have enough time to put all the pieces together. I think that's probably the way to look at it. I would say we're about 80% of the way there, but we just couldn't get that final bit together in time to make it happen.
Well, I know it certainly wasn't for want of trying. I've talked to a lot of fans of Techeetah who are all really disappointed towards the end of last season when it seemed inevitable that Techeetah, well, they all thought you guys wouldn't make it. I sort of thought in the back of my head, crossing fingers, touching wood, maybe it could happen. But like you say, just that last 20%, that was what was missing, it seems.
I find it, and I'm sure Mark shares the thing. It's actually like a gut punch. You build the team, and Mark and I worked a long time together in Formula E and Formula One before, and when it's like it's your child in a way, and somebody takes that away from you, I can't explain it any other way. And you have to actually almost go through a mourning process, in my opinion. So, but you asked the question, what am I doing personally? Of course, I'm working with Mark on seeing what we can do in other projects in Formula E, and see if we can get back on the grid with some other opportunities. And then I'm also going to be spending time working with the Canadian Sail GP team. So I'm going to do that as well for the year at least, no matter what, as we see what happens and works on these other projects. So I wanted to stay in racing, but I also, as a Canadian, wanted to do something that has the interests of the country. So Sail GP is pretty exciting, kind of F1 on water sort of idea, but sustainable at the same time. So it has nice alignment with what we've been doing the last 8 years, and to do a Canadian project was exciting for me as well.
Morning,
Absolutely.
Keith. I just wanted to ask, because you just said that you went through like a mourning process with like the whole Techeetah team going under. Was it then difficult last weekend to watch Mexico and not be there, basically?
Yeah, I mean, especially for Mark, I don't think Mark ever missed a single race, and I'd missed a few, but to not be on the grid for the first race, and especially in Mexico where it's really exciting, and there's been a lot of questions about Formula E this year and the new cars and things like that. So to see the event go off what appeared very successfully, yeah, again, another bit of a gut punch when you're looking at the grid before the race and you're expecting to be there, and you're expecting to be there with teammates and friends and things that you've become extremely close with. Yeah, I'd say it's another disappointing situation, and it's very cold in Canada, so I would have liked to been in the warmer Mexican sun than here, but that's reality. Unfortunately, the bottom line about sport these days, and probably has been this way for years and years and years, it's business and money, and without those things you don't always get to participate.
And Mark, I know you were watching the race with me, so I have a live stream of all your reactions, so I know pretty much how you were feeling while we were watching. That if you were, I know obviously it hurts not being on the grid, but I think you did hide it very well, and you put on a great show for Josh, which I think we all really appreciate. So thanks for that again.
Not a problem. As always, it was interesting watching it from outside and working with you guys on the live stream and actually having to answer questions along the way. So yeah, good.
Yeah, I made a supercut of all the questions that Josh and I put to you. We put a lot, so I apologize for putting you on the spot so much, but you gave some brilliant answers. So anyway, shall we move on to season 8 then? So it certainly had its high points with, of course, Antonio Phoenix Costa winning in New York, and Jev being a consistent podium finisher and sort of staying in that. He was one of the big four that was in the title hunt until the last 4 or so races or so, when unfortunately things didn't quite go John-Eric Verne's way. So how do you both assess the swan song season of Techeetah? Because it certainly felt like the year overall, I think the entirety of Gen 2 and the final season of Season 4, you put it all together, you guys were never outside the top 3. It was an incredible period of consistency when that, for a lot of teams, that was very hard to find.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty competitive, obviously, with the 2 Mercedes teams. Effectively, I think that was the beginning of the proper, I'd say, 4-car teams, if you want to call it that. There's obviously some of them happening again this year, where there's a lot of strong teams like Penske with Maserati and those kind of things. I think that really started to add to the competition level in Formula E. Obviously, Jev and Antonio did a good job, although I think there was some missed opportunities. But perhaps, Mercedes was a little bit too strong. But it was a pretty exciting year. We qualified well in many of the races, but we didn't race as well as we had in the past, and obviously fell back a couple of times in races when we're on pole, etc., like in Jakarta and those kind of things. So a little bit disappointing that we didn't have the race pace, but we're obviously still super quick.
My opinion on this is the same as Mark's in general. I think that we always proved with less a budget than somebody like Mercedes had and spending, and probably Porsche, maybe Jaguar even, that we were always consistent. I think that not to continue to harp on about it, but I think season 8 was a bit of a difficulty. Mark, especially, and we had our eyes on other things that needed to be done in order to continue the team. And I think that always causes a little bit of instability because people are always questioning what's coming next and wondering what's happening. And so, I put it down to that as part of the situation that you take your eye off the ball a little bit, doesn't make it as easy to focus purely on the racing side. So, and I think that especially somebody as important as Mark is to the overall functioning of the team from a racing perspective, having his eye on other things, probably, just those tiny little bits. And we know that the sport is about millimeters. So if you lose a little bit of that attention, then, it can be difficult. So, unfortunately, that's just, again, back to the reality of sport. If you're not 100% focused and you're only 99.9, that's the difference between winning all the time and just being, there and consistent, but not quite as competitive as you want to be.
My next question is about DS Automobiles. Obviously, the partner who you won season 5 and season 6 with so brilliantly. They made the deal, of course, to partner up with the Dragon Penske team quite early on, I think. And I was wondering what your reactions were to that news when you found out.
I mean, they're a car company, so they obviously had to hedge their bets and make sure they had a secure, consistent future. So we worked really closely with DS as we had done over the last previous years, and they were aware of everything that was going on our side. So I think I'm not saying it was a mutual decision, but we all went along the path together and didn't want anybody to be caught out by any surprises. So they worked as close as they could do, considering they're a big corporate.
Yeah, and I think they didn't want to make the change. I think that's the reality of the situation. I'm not sure we, in the end, left them any choice. Stability was the important thing. We worked very closely with them, especially Thomas Salochier, to make sure that we could continue, and they were nothing more than helpful and trying to give us every chance to make sure we could continue. But at the end of the day, as Mark said, stability is the key, and they needed to go in that route. So zero blame on their part, in my opinion.
Cool. That question went a lot smoother than I thought it was going to.
I mean, it's hard, right? You kind of say, look what we've done for you all this time. But again, business is business, unfortunately. Right? From a pure sporting perspective, it worked really well. And but I wish them the best, and I hope they continue to win, because we're part of the foundation of them being built towards that. As much as Penske's come in, and we know their record from the past, the majority of the team is what was built in the past anyway, and the foundation of it. It's still a big chunk of it, so it can be called whatever it wants to be called, needs to be called, but we know the foundation of what it is and the people that are there.
So Keith, you would know better than some of us, because in seasons 2 and 3, you worked for the Dragon Penske team. As I remember meeting you in London in the end of season 2. Yeah. But then at the middle or end of season 3, you were enticed to work with Mark again, because you had worked with him at Aguri, and then you worked with him again at the Techeetah just after it had been formed. So I'm always wondered what was, and Mark can answer this too afterwards. What was Mark's pitch for you to join him at Techeetah?
I'm not sure it was Mark's. It was funny. I never really wanted to leave Aguri in the first place, so I didn't really see eye to eye with the owners that had come in between. Again, a necessary situation, but I never really seen eye to eye to them. And I believe it was at the Mexico race, actually. We had just done the golf sponsorship, and for me, it came to an end. It really had zero to do with Mark. It was a personal decision, and it was based on owners. And I walked down the grid and had a chat with Jay Penske, and I joined Jay 2 weeks later. Jay is a different kind of individual for me. He's quite a savvy businessman, and I'd say actually he's one of the smartest commercial people. Understands the commercial side of sport really well, and there have been a lot of ideas that have come out of Jay in the series that you guys wouldn't be aware of, but were quite forward thinking and sensible because my background came before F1 and stuff as professional sports in North America, and I always believe that we need to have a different way of looking at motorsport from a cooperative perspective, that all the teams work together to make it better, which there is an amount of on the technical side in Formula E, but on the commercial side, not always. And so Jay is forward thinking in those ideas, but Jay didn't have the budget to do things the way that were done by Mark and Techeetah and Aguri, even in the days before Techeetah. So I was never super of the belief that Dragon would win, and so it was an easy decision for me to go to Techeetah, because number one, I like working with Mark, and I believed that there was a real opportunity there. It was not the easiest place to be either, because I'll just be frank, in my opinion, our Chinese ownership didn't understand what needed to be done to become commercially successful. They didn't understand to look beyond what you do on a day-to-day race team to create a proper business that had opportunity to make profits or be in other business sectors. So, Mark and I actually, strangely, even when I was at Dragon and he was, finding his way with the Chinese ownership, we were still talking all the time about commercial matters and things like that. So in year one at Techeetah, I think Mark would admit they didn't really do much commercial at all. It was reliance on China being a big part of, thinking that they were going to get sponsors out of China of their own connections. That's not really realistic. China very seldom from scratch when I joined.
Okay, sorry, Keith, you broke up a little bit near the end, but I think we got most of that. It's not your fault, don't worry. Mark, do you have anything to add to that? Keith, big hire, and of course, Keith said there that he always thought there was a better chance of winning at Techeetah, but he couldn't have known the incredible success with those 3 drivers' titles and 2 teams championships that you guys sealed together.
Well, I think maybe I'll answer it a different way. Do you remember, Keith, when we first won, I think, our first race in our first championship at Techeetah? I think you said, this is the first time I've won something in motorsport, because when you join F1, it's kind of a weird thing, F1. The teams are so big, and it's so rare in some ways that you end up at the right time at the right place at a Formula One team, that even Jev, said the same thing, that he'd been in F1 for X many years. And when we won the first race in Montreal, that was actually the first race he had won himself for, I think it was 5 or 6 years, because the previous races he'd won were in before he entered F1. So actually, I think it was probably true. Come and win some races with us. Won more and more championships as time went on. So it was that's the first time probably having won for a while there. Is that right, Keith?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the day when I said, "Oh, we're on pole position." I've been in motorsport all these years. I've never had a pole position, and then we got the podium, and I was like, "Oh my god, we had a first place. I've never been in first place," and winning the championship then was just unbelievable, right? So it was, it's a bit of a shock to the system when you actually win after, trotting around in Formula One. I had some podiums and things, both with Jaguar and British American Racing, but never the top step even. So it was really quite incredible an experience, right? And then to move forward from that championship to another one, and be working with Pedro de la Rosa, who Mark and I both known for years, and I had worked at, back to Arrows and Jaguar together. That was a great experience as well. So fundamentally, no matter what happened, you look back and you had those amazing times and opportunities.
Indeed. And so my next question is actually about that on the similar theme. To you both, how do you both reflect on the incredible journey? And I guess it dates back to Aguri as well, doesn't it? That you guys went on at Aguri and then Techeetah together, where you went from underdog customer team to all-conquering work squad. And to put it more succinctly, what are the things you're going to miss the most about the team?
I think the biggest thing is that it sort of, we proved that it takes time to build up, and I sometimes compare it a little bit to what Mercedes has done in F1, and some of the things you look at in some of the successful teams, they don't just happen overnight. You know, they build up over time. You know, even if Mercedes in Formula E started as HWA and, you know, built up to it over time, the same is true in Formula One, and it's the same true in Formula E. You know, we started in season one, obviously. A group of the guys like Leo Thomas and others joined us in season two, and then Antonio was with us in season 1 and 2, and he went away on a sabbatical, we call it, you know, at BMW, and then he came back and won straight away. And Jev had been helping us build from season 3. So if you look at it, it was a long building process. So that's probably the most frustrating thing, is that the next team, whatever team we get involved in, there'll be a building process required no matter what. And, you know, you see the same thing in every sport. It takes time to develop, and that's I suppose the frustrating thing too. Have built something to a winning team, and then you need to really start again.
Yeah, and I feel the same way about Mark, that starting over and having to build up, although it's a challenge and it's exciting, it's never easy. But I'm going to miss the dysfunctional camaraderie we had as a team. But we still all pulled together and made things happen. And when you have a whole bunch of different cultures and people from different countries and stuff all together, and you still make it happen, it's pretty cool. And I'm going to miss celebrating the championships and tequila. I miss tequila as well.
Well, I mean, we can get that anytime, but certainly the reason to drink after a race victory, it's not going to be that.
Yeah, I'm not a drinker, as Mark knows. I don't really drink, but you know, tequila after a championship is necessary.
So next question I have is about obviously Techeetah built up a very loyal fan base over the years, and a lot of them are wondering of what comes next for you guys. Obviously, I know there's only so much you can tell us about that because it's sort of in the works at the moment. But can you guys tell us anything about the plans for the future for either of you?
Yes. So I've joined Lola Cars and looking at with Till, who has taken that over, at, you know, what the future of motorsport might hold for Lola. He's keen to take it back to the to its history, and that probably means, you know, single seaters and prototypes as Lola had done over the previous quite a number of years, I think since 1958. But also with a focus on the future as to, you know, new energy powertrains, and that could, you know, branch as widely as synthetic fuels, hydrogen, EV powertrains, and we'll see where that, you know, that takes us. But that's going to be an exciting journey because it's allowed me to step back and look at motorsport as a whole, which I haven't done for a while, and so that's really a fascinating journey that I'm on, at least with Lola.
Yeah, and well, I'm consulting for Lola because I'm not allowed to do any work unless Mark lets me, so, and tells me what to do. So yeah, I'm commercially consulting for Lola at this point in time, and will become more involved depending upon how things go from a racing perspective and what we're going to do. I love the heritage of the brand. I've always been a brand person, obviously, from my side of the fence. And I think Lola's a great brand. It'll be great to, you know, live or tread off its history in some ways, but to create new things is exciting to me. And I'm hoping that as part of that, the beyond, you know, chassis manufacturing and all the things that Mark alluded to technically, that we're doing some other things that are race based, and we'll see on that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be so I should say the Chief Commercial Officer at Sail GP Canada. So working on that as well.
That's really excellent to hear. But, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same. It's still
Yeah.
you guys working together, and it's still really heartwarming, I have to say.
I don't know how to work without Mark.
Oh, you're
Or
doing
I
yourself
feel
a
bad for him
disservice
about
there,
that.
Keith.
I feel bad for Mark about that.
Okay, so final question I have on this section is for you both. Who you'll be cheering for this season? I'm assuming you guys are both going to cheer with one of the three drivers that you worked with very prominently at Techeetah, of course, Antonio, Jev, or Andre Lotter. Is it going to be any of those three, or is it you guys going to be cheering for anyone different this season?
Well, I'm quite close friends with Andre. We spend a lot of time talking. So I would say my thing would be to pull for them. I'd also like to see Andretti be successful, and I hope the Porsche engine works for them. I think it's really important that Porsche do well for the series. So we'll always pull for Antonio. I mean, Mark very early on, of course, had Antonio on his radar and had him in the team at Aguri, so I think that obviously we have a soft spot, or I do as well, for him. But in general, I'd just like it to be a good season. I'm not a huge fan of the cars. Lots of people aren't. But I thought the race looked fast and interesting out of Mexico, and maybe it's just a different perspective of watching it on TV, which I haven't done much. But yeah, for me, it'd be Andre. Plus, he's an old guy like me, so it's perfect. See the old guy do all right.
Yeah, I'll probably have to go for Antonio, just because he got my first win in season 1, and had been with us for a number of years and helped us build up. But obviously, Jev and Andre are also very close to our hearts as well. So all three of them. I don't mind jumping ship. When one of them's at the front, I'll just say I was going for them. So it's always good for the guys on the podium.
Yeah, it's easy to do that now. You're not actually running a team. You can just switch to drivers from a completely different team, pretend you're supporting them all along. So anyway, thank you very much. That was pretty much all the questions I had about Techeetah. Unless Pico, you had any?
Not in particularly, no. However, I will say, because you guys were talking about season 8 and everything. One of my prominent memories from last season, because I spent most of the year with in and around the paddock, and my final walk down the pit lane, Antonio Felix da Costa came past me strapped to, I think it was a tire, one of the tire wheeler things, covered in booze and cake, I think it was. And that was one of my favorite moments, I think, of the season.
Yeah, that was a fun moment.
It's quite good. I think that's becoming a standard thing. Didn't I see Nick de Vries have the same thing in F1? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think he did. I think it started with Sam, because I think he got taken to Jag covered in something, I don't know, from Envision a few years ago. But yeah,
right. Yeah, we were happy to get rid of him.
Well, no one does deliveries quite like Techeetah, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was a fun time. Antonio is a really affable kind of happy guy, and we had a very different dynamics in the garage between him and Jev. Although I'd say that Jev was a bit of a revelation last year, a very different sort of mindset. I don't know if it was marriage and babies that made it different, but a little mature, less less volatile, maybe less grumpy anyway. And but Antonio is always the kind of guy who just comes in with a big smile on his face, and it kind of really lifts the garage, which is good too. But at the same time, there's that type of approach, and then there's the type of approach with somebody like Jev, who's getting the team whipped into shape, right? So sometimes that really works, and other times happy-go-lucky works as well. So interesting dynamic between the two of them. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. They obviously didn't have a great weekend at DS Penske. Antonio was a little better. So I imagine it must be hard for Porsche. I assume have a customer team for the first time that beats them fairly handily, I guess. So anyway, the point is that we'll be watching with interest, And as Mark said, yeah, he probably took the smart route. Whoever's on the top step was who we were cheering for.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure we'll be watching with interest too for the rest of the season.